Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
In this episode, I had the chance to chat with Lily Meade, author of the new young adult novel, The Hex Girls, A Rogue Thorn, which is out now. It was released on August 26th. Lily is also a huge Scooby-Doo fan. I had the pleasure of reading an advanced copy ahead of the interview, so we do go into detail about the plot, and there are spoilers. But don't worry, I've got you covered. That section is flagged with me saying that there will be spoilers, but if you're listening to this sort of in the background, also look out for this sound. This is when the spoilers are starting.
Hit it, sisters!
Zoinks! It's the witches!
And I've also put time codes in the episode description, so just feel free to skip that section and come back when you've read the book. Without further ado, let's get right to the interview. First of all, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
I am so honored and excited. This whole process has been super cool, and now I get to talk about Scooby-Doo for an hour.
Absolutely. I love nothing more than talking about Scooby-Doo for however long people will let me.
Same.
First of all, I always start my interviews with 3 questions of Scooby-Doo related trivia. Are you up for it?
I hope I am.
They're all related to the Hex Girls, so I'm hoping that you should be well versed.
I did I did my studying, yeah.
We'll start with an easy one. So the first one, what is Thorn's real name?
Sally McKnight.
Yes, perfect. And for the second question, what year was Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost released?
Oh, that's actually a more difficult one because I was little when it came out.
I do have options. If you want 3 multiple choice options, I can give you those.
I'm feeling like it's 97, but it could be 99. It's definitely within the last few years of the 90s. But all I remember is mostly watching them.
Totally. It was 99.
Yeah.
And for the last one for the trivia, can you name 2 Hex Girls song titles?
Yes. They've got Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air, which is funny because wind and air are the same thing. And obviously we have the Hex Girls, so boom, 2.
Perfect. And so to start off with just the general questions, what is your relationship to Scooby-Doo? Did you grow up watching?
Yes, I did. I don't remember exactly when I started watching Scooby's just always been a part of my history. And I think part of it was that my family was the type of family to sit in front of the TV and watch Law and Order together. So procedural mysteries were always a bonding thing, and I guess I probably really like Scooby because the mysteries were easier for me to grasp when I was little. I ended up being really proud once I was to the point of figuring out who the bad guys were on the older shows before the detectives did, and Scooby helped me with that a lot. But I also just love the gang. It was a group of friends. It was a dog. We weren't allowed to have a dog because at first we lived in an apartment, and then when we lived in a house, there were 3 of us, and Mom was like, not until you show the a proper amount of responsibility. So I've just always loved Scooby, and I was raised on like the classic Scooby and then like a pup named Scooby-Doo. Um, and then obviously came the movies that everybody so fondly remembers. And I remember watching Zombie Island for the first time, and that like sort of changed my life. I actually like wrote a blog post early in like my publishing journey about how Scooby changed like the way I see imagination, because up until that point, Scooby was very straightforward. Like they would encounter a mystery and it would always be a bad guy in a mask. And in Zombie Island, it was not a bad guy in a mask. The monsters were real. And that was true of all of those Scooby Renaissance movies. And that sort of just like blew my little tiny mind. And I didn't I didn't know at that point that like you could have like a really grounded in real life story and then have this speculative element that makes things even bigger. Um, and that's the way I like to write. So that was a really exciting point for me. And there's like this running theme in all of our old childhood photos of me. Like, you cannot find a photo of me below the age of like 7 or 8 where I'm not either wearing, surrounded, or watching Scooby-Doo. like I, Scooby's just always been a big, big, big part of my history.
Do you have a favorite personal memory related to Scooby-Doo? Is there one from childhood or maybe just getting to write the book?
I have a lot of great uh thoughts and like memories and experiences that I've been able to have since um being offered the book. I would say, oh, this is the story my mom loves to bring up, is that when I was in preschool, I'd walk into class and my teachers would be like, "Hi, Lily," and I'd be like, "My name is not Lily today. My name is Velma because I'm very smart." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And then the next day I'd come in and they'd be like, "Hello, Velma." And I'd be like, "I'm not Velma today. I am Daphne because I'm very pretty." And it would just go back and forth based on whether I felt I was pretty or smart, because when you're that little, you don't know you can be both. My mom loves that story.
So funny. Was writing a career that you had always been interested in and wanted to pursue, or how did that come about?
I actually didn't even know I was good at writing until I was 13 and broke my leg. I broke it slipping on a frozen newspaper, which is the lamest way to shatter your leg in 3 places. Um, it was a really bad break, and I remember that the doctors were like pulling other doctors down from different floors, not to consult on it, but to be like on Grey's Anatomy, like, "Look what I get to operate on." And they even asked me, they're like, "Do you want to see the x-ray?" And I was like, "No, just fix it." But obviously, like, after a break that bad, I had a lot of screws in my leg and I was laid up and then in a boot and a wheelchair for like several months. And I was a really active kid before, but I'd always been a reader. So when I couldn't be as active, I was reading a lot and I was online a lot, and I discovered fan fiction. So I started writing fan fiction, and people were telling me that I was good at writing, and I had no idea about this. And I looked at older report cards and it would say, "Lily really has a talent for writing. That's something that she should con continue to pursue." And I was like, "OMG, did I find what I'm good at?" And then from there, I started my own original writing and eventually got my first book deal. So I've always been like a reader, and my mom, like when I was little, she would take pictures of me, like interacting with my toys or posing and to do certain stuff, and write me as the star of my own little storybooks. So like I always saw myself in fiction. Um, so it was, once I realized I was good at it, it was like inevitable that that was always where I was going to go. But somebody had to point it out first.
Did you write any Scooby-Doo fan fiction?
I didn't, which is the crazy thing. You would think that I would have, especially considering how obsessed I was. I started writing fan fiction for a middle school series called like The Click, which was about these like rich um New York girls. And then I wrote Harry Potter and Twilight fan fiction because I was a Twilight fan girl, of course. Um and then I've written like fan fiction for various TV shows I watch. I still occasionally will write a one shot and post it to my secret AO3 account nobody knows about. Um but I actually never wrote Scooby-Doo fan fiction, even though like ever since I found out that like intellectual property is like a thing that I I've had on my website, like my ultimate career goal is to write a young adults modern Scooby-Doo. Um I think I didn't write a Scooby-Doo fan fiction because I was like, one day I'm gonna write official Scooby.
You knew.
I knew, even though I really didn't know. Like it was such a dream.
And so what is your writing process like? And do you have any like little quirks? Like, is there anything that you specifically need to have you when you, beside you when you're writing?
I know a lot of people who like to have like specific scents or something going on. I don't really need that. Like I can write anywhere. When we had a house, I would write on my phone when I was doing my daily walks. I I have like a genetic condition that causes chronic migraines, so I like to be really strict about like my writing time. I'll when I'm drafting, I like to sit down and not get up until I've gotten a chapter written. But like I also know that inspiration is inspiration, and if it hits, I should put it down. But I think the most unique thing about me, the thing that makes people like drop their mouths, is that I'm a extremely heavy outliner for the same reason. I can't like afford to waste my time, so I need to know what I'm writing. And my outlines are like 10,000 words. um, so when so when so when we were working on Scooby, that's actually really good for intellectual property because they want you to work to write really fast and they also want to work really quickly with you. And so I wrote my outline and then I submitted it to my editor and we did edits on it and we submitted it to Warner Brothers and we went back and forth until Warner Brothers was happy with the outline. And I am really glad we did it that way because Warner had a lot of thoughts. What was really funny was that when they pitched me this story, they were like, we would love a Scooby-Doo book with the Hex Girls where they're like roughly the same age and they're going to high school together and they solve a mystery. And they're like, but the plot is up to you. And I was like, are you serious? Free reign? This is so cool. And I wanted to like I was so excited but also nervous. I was like, they know that I like Scooby because I posted it on my website, but they read my book, so they know that I'm a professional writer. Like, so I can't let them know what an unhinged fangirl I am. And I called my friends and I was like, okay, what do you do if you're like if you're trying to impress them? And she's like, well, you don't want to like go over the top. Like, say if you want um to put in like little nods that Velma's canonically a lesbian, you might want to do that in subtext instead of asking because I asked about this certain thing and I was given a no. So putting in my subtext made it harder. And I was like, okay, so I won't ask to make like Velma super duper gay. But then like when we sent it the first time, they were like, hey, can you make Velma gay? I was like, yes, yes, I can. Um, and I called this book Project Darker Gayer when I was talking about it before it was announced because literally every time we submitted something to Warner Brothers, they were like, "We love this. Can you make it darker and can you make it gayer?" like it was just really really cool how important it was to um m- to me, the publisher, and Warner Brothers that this be not just like another Scooby-Doo book, but like a really authentic story of representation and like real stakes. And I'm just so honored. Like if you took out everything Scooby-Doo and like put all these different names on it, and it was just the same story, but like not obviously officially Scooby-Doo, I would be equally as proud of it because it's just a really, really good story and I'm super excited about it. I had a lot of fun putting in little tiny references because I wanted it to be enjoyable for new fans because I love Scooby-Doo and one of the reasons I've always wanted to write a modern Scooby is because I feel like the lessons and the theme and like the connection of what makes Scooby so great is like a timeless thing. Like it's really relatable to young people of all ages. And I really wanted the honor of introducing Scooby to a younger audience. But obviously, like I've never fallen out of love with Scooby. So I also wanted to make it really enjoyable for people who have loved Scooby their entire lives.
That comes through for sure. So I wanted to go back a little bit in the process. How did you come to work on the Scooby-Doo book? Did Warner Brothers and the publisher come to you in that case?
It was crazy. So like I said, I've had this on my author about page on my website. I have like my personal introduction, then I have like a silly one and a serious one. And at the end of my personal introduction, made like a little jokey post. I said, my ultimate career dream is to write a modern Scooby-Doo, uh, because I thought that was like relatable. And also was my goal. And people on in my writing social media groups every once in a while, like every like 4 months or so, they'll be like, what would be your dream franchise to write for? And every time I would be like, Scooby-Doo, please, Warner Brothers, please hire me to write Scooby-Doo. But I actually was not like actively like seeking it out. This actually came about because I have a friend who also writes intellectual property. She's written for Jurassic World, and I've actually replaced um, my last line on my about page with um, now please let me like feed fictional people to dinosaurs because I've also have loved Jurassic Park since I was a little girl. The movie actually premiered on my birthday, and I was always telling her, I'm like, you're living my dream. I wish I was you. And when we met in person for the first time, as you do, because you have lots of online friends and then you meet them in person when the paths align, she said that she would tell her editor the next time he reached out that I was also interested in Jurassic World. And um, then a couple months later she texted me and said that she did. She had mentioned me and she said she also told him that I love Scooby-Doo and he said, "Oh, we're thinking about doing something with Scooby soon." Um and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool," because I mean, it's just a friend saying, "Hey, my friend likes these properties. Maybe we could do something." But like this was before my book had come out. Like the only reason we'd actually been able to meet up is that our publisher sent us to the same like trade show at the same time. So we were promoting our books and we had like a moment to have lunch. So my book wasn't even out yet and it was my first book, and with IP, typically they don't hire debuts or unknown writers because they need you to write fast, they need you to write quickly, and they need to know that you work well with others, um, which is all stuff that I talk about in the um, from fandom to fans of your own writing workshop that uh, anyone can come visit for free if they pre-order the book, um, or buy it in the first week. And so I wasn't expecting to be offered anything. I'd actually auditioned for a couple IP projects, nothing as big as Scooby-Doo, and actually didn't make the cut for a couple different things. But then 3 months after my first book came out, they emailed my agent and said that they'd um, read The Shadow Sister and they loved it. And they saw on my website that I was interested in writing for Scooby-Doo, and they'd think I would be perfect uh, for this Scooby-Doo book they were working on. And my editor, my agent, like we're both fangirls. We connected over like our bond of Star Trek, but she was like, "We are on deadline for your second book, so it might be like a tight fit. So I don't know." And I replied and I said, "I would do this for free. Let's make it work." Like, uh, because originally they wanted it within like 6 weeks, and that would have been a really fast turnover because we didn't even have like an idea of what we were doing then. But then it got delayed a little bit because they needed to renew some contract negotiations, and they didn't know if it would take a couple weeks or a couple months. So the original pub date was actually supposed to be on the 25th anniversary of the Hex Girls, but that ended up being around when we announced the book instead. And I'm glad that we had more time to work on the book, because I feel like that allowed us to be more collaborative with it. And also, it's been really, really fun having more time to promote it. So.
How much did they come to you with again? Like you had briefly mentioned it, but what was the idea when they came to you?
Yeah, it was funny because they said that they read the Shadow Sister, and um that made them think that I would be a great fit for Scooby-Doo. And I was thinking, how does the Shadow Sister work as a good audition for Scooby-Doo? Because my first book is about two sisters and one goes missing and she comes back like traumatized, and it is a spooky thriller. And then I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, it's got a teen detective because the sister that didn't disappear is trying to figure out like what's going on with her sister, but she's motivated by proving her sister's a liar and a brat, instead of like the passion of solving mysteries. And she's also like, there's like a running joke between me and my critique partners that Casey is the world's worst detective because like the answers to a lot of things are like right in front of her, and she doesn't see it because her motivation is proving her sister wrong instead of actually just uncovering a mystery. But they also have a really cute little dog named Romeo. He's a corgi, and he stole the scene in every scene he was in. Readers were obsessed with him, and it is a spooky mystery. Like the ultimate reveal isn't entirely normal. And once I thought about that, I was like, oh yeah, actually that is a pretty good Scooby-Doo audition. um, and like I said, I was game to do it no matter what they wanted me to do, even if they gave me an outline that was already like piece by piece by piece and I was just like painting by numbers. I would have been on board. But they said that they wanted something to celebrate and highlight the Hex Girls. And they wanted them to be around the same age. Because I think in the movie you can't, I think they kind of are around the same age, but you can't tell if it seems like the gang are supposed to be like mid-20s and the Hex Girls are like maybe like early college age. But everybody in the books is teenagers. I don't really give an exact age, but they're like between sophomore to juniors. Um and they wanted them in high school together. And they wanted them to solve a mystery. But they gave the rest of the me free reign for the rest of the plot, and I thought that was really fun. And I asked him some like probing questions, um, because like I didn't know what I was allowed to reference and what I wasn't. But once it was clear that I could, it didn't have to be a direct sequel to the movie, but like they wouldn't be against it if it was kind of a sequel to the movie. I really wanted to expand upon the original lore because I felt like part of the reason everybody loves the Hex Girls is because there's so much cool lore that is introduced in that film. And in my head, I actually had always, oh, I can't say that part. Like I can't say that part because it'll be a spoiler. Maybe I can tell you after we turn record off. But people might be listening to this before they read. But like there was something about the original movie that I thought had always been a connection. And when I rewatched it, it wasn't like outright not there, but like if I put it in the book, I would be like sort of creating lore. And I was like, oh, and I was like, can I do this? And they're like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. And so I was really, really excited about that. This whole process of just like playing with characters that already exist and creating new lore. I got to name the other two Hex Girls, and it's just been so fun.
And what is it like to translate cartoon characters into a literary format? Is it easier or more challenging when they're like very like distinct personalities and appearances?
Actually, it's yeah. I think it was uh, helpful in a way because like I didn't have to come up with what they look like. And they're all, because they're so distinct, um it was easy to highlight those differences and make them stand apart because I think the biggest challenge is that this is a very large cast because we have all of the Scooby Gang and all of the Hex Girls. Um, and there's just a lot of moving parts, especially when they're all in a scene together. So writing from a cartoon, I think, really helped because when there's like 5 to 8 voices at the same time, being peop a reader being able to tell who's talking just by like the way that they talk, like that's really groovy, man. Like it, uh it it made it easier in a way, and also it's just fun because everybody loves these characters because they're so distinct. And it was fun to play with like the flirty banter and teasing between like Fred and Daphne, and we had a lot of fun moments. There's there's this scene where Thorn is dejected at lunch and she's not really eating her salad, and Shaggy asks for it, and uh, I originally just had it that he asks for it and she gives it to him, but my editor was like, "What if he pours it on top of his sandwich and then puts the bread back on top?" And I was like, "I love that! I love that so much." It was really fun to add like those classic moments, like the my glasses moment, the like running and crisscrossing directions. Um, it was really fun translating from uh screen to book instead of book to screen.
And what would you say is your favorite thing about writing from the perspective of the Scooby-Doo characters?
It's really the fact that like my copies arrived last early last week, and holding in my hand, it's like crazy. I'm a Scooby-Doo author. I'm a part of Scooby-Doo canon and Scooby lore like for the rest of my life. It's just really 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 cool that these characters that have meant so much to me my entire life are like, even though like I won't get royalties, and like now that I've been paid, like my my financial part of the process is done because I don't own the copyright to Scooby-Doo. So I don't own like the characters, but I do technically. Like the gang and the Hex Girls are are mine in a way for like the rest of my life because I got to make my own little impact on them. And that's like such an honor. I don't think I'm ever, ever, ever gonna be over that.
And so this novel is fairly similar in format to like a Daphne and Velma trio trilogy of books from a couple years ago. Were you familiar with those? Did you read them for reference at all?
I was familiar with the other Scooby-Doo books, but I did not read them because I didn't want an influence. I could read them now. Um, I heard that like the trilogy wasn't all written by the same person. I did leave this open to more books in the world. At the moment, it doesn't seem like Warner's planning any more books in the world, but if it does well, maybe they might. Obviously because they own the copyright, they could expand upon the seeds that I've laid for future stuff in this world with another author, but they also know that I'm very on board to come back and work with them again. And I think they like me. I they they liked working with me, and they love how much I've been willing to promote the book, especially because since it's IP, I don't have to. I could have just been like, "Hey, I wrote a Scooby Doo book. You can check it out." Like, there's not as much of a um, an obligation for the writer to do a lot of the promotion because, like I've been telling people, IP books typically are expected to promote themselves in a way because like if somebody sees this book at like the shelves of a grocery store, they're gonna be like, "The Hex Girls? That's all I need to know," and put it in their cart. Like it's gonna sell lots and lots and lots of copies, which is why my mom's been like, "So the only way this benefits her now is if it hits a list. So we gotta pre-order, pre-order, pre-order." um, but I'm also just really, 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 really proud of it and really excited, and I've been having so much fun meeting new Scooby fans and sharing my process and like the music that inspired me. So I've just had a lot of fun promoting it. So I think they would be willing to work with me again because I was willing to do the work, but also help promote.
And I wanted to ask if there were more coming down the line or something like that, because all of the yeah, all of the pre-order listings have that like little bracket of like the Scooby-Doo and Friends at the end of it, which makes it seem like it'll be a series.
Yeah, this is actually this is actually technically like the second book in the Scooby-Doo and Friends. The other one is like a children's book though. It's like a paperback. It came out last year. Um, I do think I don't think they would be opposed to it if people were interested. But at this moment, they don't have any current plans. But the thing is, IP is so fast that if there is a lot of interest, if it sells well, then they could very easily spin on a dime and be like, all right, let's do more. And hire me or hire somebody else to do more books. Because like I said, I think the first two of the Daphne and Velma trilogy were written by the same person, but then the third one wasn't. It was written by somebody else. Um, and so like because it's IP, um, they can hire somebody else to continue the series if they want. Like I would hope that they would continue to hire me, but like I'll still support it if they hire somebody else. But I think they'll only do that if it does well. Like they're being a bit more conservative this time, except in like the content of the book. um and in hedging their bets. But I think there's a lot of interest because like um they were somewhat interested in doing this because of how people responded to Velma. Not so much like exactly how they responded to Velma, because not a lot of Scooby fans like Velma, but that there was, I think they were surprised at how much people were interested and cared about Scooby still nowadays. And they, so they wanted to have something that was like more upper YA, a bit darker, that would um more fit like the current YA landscape, instead of like a middle grade type thing, because there are lots of Scooby-Doo chapter books. Uh, and there's a new Netflix live action that's in the process. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of increased Scooby interest. Um, I'm I'm hopeful for more books in the world, and I definitely left some seeds open, and I have some ideas if they would like me to write in this world some more. I left some stuff there.
And I want to dive into your inspirations, but I'm also just like gonna say that I want to go into some like spoiler heavy stuff. So just like a little like
Yeah, we can go into some spoiler stuff, but I figured you probably would like to be like, hey
totally.
listeners, from here on out it's going to be a spoiler section, so I didn't want to just
Yeah.
drop a spoiler
Yeah,
like
so this
early
is
on.
officially the heads up that we're going into some like spoiler heavy sections. Um
Hit it, sisters.
Zoinks! It's the witches!
but we'll start that off with what were your main inspirations for a Rogue Thorn?
Definitely a witch's ghost, and there's this Netflix movie series that's based on another book property, Goosebumps. They have like a Fear Street trilogy, and I really like the vibe of that. Like it was it was set like three different time periods, but there was like this big mystery connecting them through time. That's another thing that I love writing about in my books. Like my writing motto is real life issues through an extraordinary lens. Because you can't like defeat racism or poverty, but you can make a villain that's like larger than life and defeat it that way. Um, and that gives you like the strength to continue on with the stuff that you have to live with. And I also love stories that are heavily informed by the past. So I really loved that in The Witch's Ghost, so much of the story is also about like Ben Ravencroft and his ancestor, and like whether or not she was evil or if she was just like uh, a a woman who was judged by her time. And I thought that was an interesting parallel because like the gang initially judges the Hex Girls based on what they look like, and they turn out to just be some sweet girls who care about the earth. And uh I also loved that the Hex Girls are a band. I'm like a big, big Taylor Swift fan, which is so funny because the Hex Girls are like the opposite of what you would expect for Taylor Swift. But like I I really love music and I love stories about music and I love um characters who are really inspired by stuff. So that was really fun to play with. And it's just so cool to have all these different options and so many different places that I could play in or take inspiration from.
And were there any aspects to the characters or any settings or anything that you really wanted to get the chance to like play around with and change for the book?
They originally wanted the book set in Crystal Cove. Um, and I was like, I think Coolsville is a better choice. They thought Coolsville was like too lame. like like they didn't outright say it was too lame. They just like I said, they kept wanting it like darker and gayer and they thought Crystal Cove was darker. And I said, like, Coolsville is almost sinisterly not dark. And like once I explained what I was planning to do with that fact, they were like, "Ooh, that's cool. Let's do that." But then I still managed to get us to Crystal Cove anyways. But I just felt like lots of people love Crystal Cove, but I love Coolsville. That's where a lot of the early stuff that I was raised on was set, and it's not in a lot of the new modern Scooby media. So I really wanted to give it an opportunity to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the latest modern Scooby-Doo really like leans heavily towards Crystal Cove since Mystery Incorporated came out.
Yeah, because yeah, there's lots of potential there, but I feel like there's lots of potential in Coolsville too.
Totally. Yeah, I agree for sure. And was there anything that you absolutely wanted to stay true to from the show?
I don't think so. They didn't really ask me to do anything that would that like that's part of the thing about working with IP is that they very much want you to stay in line with canon for the most part. So they didn't really ask me to do anything that um I think that was pretty much it. Like they initially wanted it in Crystal Cove and I would have if they were hardline on that, I would have that was another interesting thing is that like I expected working with IP like for them to be like you need to do it this way and this is the only way. Um but like they were very flexible on a lot of stuff as long as I had like a good reason and I could explain why I wanted to do this or how I was going to like flip this intention on its head. um they were very on board. I was shocked and like I want to do more IP because I really love this. It's being like paid to write fan fiction, but I don't expect any other IP gig to be as like collaborative and like respectful of my vision as Warner Brothers was. Because this was like a dream come true. It was really cool.
And that's great to hear too, because like obviously in the Scooby world of like animated movies, there hasn't been a lot recently with like, cuts and things like that. So it's nice to hear that they're like really into it still.
Yeah, there was like there's been like two Scooby movies that were like almost fully ready that were scrapped. Like I think a sequel to the most recent like one that was in theaters was scrapped, and then there was another movie that was supposed to feature the Hex Girls that was scrapped, um, which sucks. And so like I know a lot of Scooby fans have been worried about like the state of Scooby. That's not I wouldn't say that those things being scrapped are like evident of like Scooby declining so much as Warner Brothers has had a lot of like financial issues recently, but it does seem like they're on an upswing. They're doing really well with like their new DC stuff, and I hope that Scooby does well. But like there's been a lot of fans who've been really worried, and there's some really defensive and worried that like I wasn't going to be taking care of it the way that they would want. Like a lot of people did not like Velma. I did not like Velma. And that was funny because I remember Velma came out. I was so excited for Velma. And then like the more I heard of it pre it coming out, I was like, this does not sound like it's going to be super fun for for Scooby fans. And then when it came out and everybody really didn't like it, I was like, Warner Brothers, you should hire me to write the story that Velma should have been. And I like directly tagged them. That was just another one of those tweets where like, let me have a chance at it. And when I got the opportunity, one of my friends went through like my social media and just searched up every time I mentioned Scooby Doo, and she's like, "You've been manifesting this."
You mentioned a couple of the reoccurring characters or nods to the series that you included in the book. Was there anything that you maybe thought of including or wanted to include that didn't make it into the final draft?
Actually, no. The only thing, because uh, the two biggest things that I wanted to include are actually sort of pivotal to the storyline. Um, the Ravencroft and Oakhaven elements. And but I put a lot of little nods in there. There's one that I wish was more obvious. There's like this moment when they're sitting, um, watching talent show auditions, and Daphne's like really interested in this like puppet show that's being on the talent. I wanted to like sit in that moment but I knew that like it just would have kind of killed the pacing. But that was a nod to the pilot of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, which I watched when I was researching. My research for writing this book was so funny because I would I subscribed to Boomerang, and I was just rewatching everything. And I would like take pictures of my tablet with Scooby on the screen, and I'm like, my homework is so hard. uh, but like I gave Be Cool Scooby Doo a chance, which I hadn't when it originally came out because I didn't really like the animation style. But the animation style grew on me, and I think it's like possibly one of, if not my favorite, of the TV shows because it really gets Scooby well, and it's so funny. So I really wanted that little moment. One of the running gags of Be Cool Scooby-Doo is that every episode Daphne has like a new little hobby that's really silly and ridiculous, and it always ends up helping them solve the mystery. And in the opening episode, she's like really into puppetry. So I really wanted that reference to be a bit more obvious, but it just wouldn't have made sense to like have like this whole little bit of her being obsessed with those puppets.
I would have loved it, but
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
You mentioned getting to name the other two Hex Girls.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Did you get any reference from for those?
So they needed names because they don't have names. And if they were going to school together, they wouldn't be really referred to by their names. Their band names. So we needed to come up with names, and they left that to me. I had to submit them for approval. But I decided to take the names of the voice actresses and like switch the orders of the first and last names. And I submitted that. I also did that with a nod for Thorne's mother, so that all three voice actresses were uh, acknowledged in that way. And I was really honored for that opportunity, because now they have a name for forever and ever after 25 years.
Totally. Yeah, long enough. It took long enough for sure. So, especially in recent years, but kind of since the first appearance of the Hex Girls and then Velma, obviously, they're very viewed as like queer icons within the Scooby-Doo franchise. Um, why was it important to you, and then also thus important to Warner Brothers, to make this book so gay?
Well, like you said, they are iconic queer icons. I think a lot of people like I think there's like this running meme like raise your hand if the Hex Girls were your bisexual awakening. um I think there can be something like really queer about like just like goth culture and like the punk rock like sort of aesthetic in general. And I wouldn't say that there's like something queer about Scooby-Doo as a whole, but it is sort of like queer and sort of like the counterculture of it because it came about in like the 60s, and um it's a group of teens who are going like against what is like expected of them in the original series. So they're like on this constant road trip, but they're still young and they're like really motivated to expose corruption and um like people taking advantage of others, which is unfortunately a counterculture position, especially nowadays, unfortunately, like caring about other people, wanting people not to be taken advantage of or exploited is is a controversial opinion nowadays, which is one of the reasons I feel like Scooby is so timeless. Uh, and I feel like when you have characters that are that passionate about those sort of things, people who feel different and like um, an outcast in a sort of way, on their own, they connect to that. I mean, like everybody wants to be part of the gang, like the four best friends you could ever have, and then Scooby, who's unconditionally like loves you, and the Hex Girls are also like this trio that are so close that they're like sisters, hit it sisters. Um, and I feel a, a lot of like queer icons that are more than just like one person when they're like bands or like groups of people. It's for the connection of it all. And it it was just really, really, really cool to embrace that. I heard from a fan that in the Velma and Daphne books that Thorn was also queer in those books. Somebody said that uh Velma mentions that Thorn has a crush on her, but Velma isn't gay in that book, and so she's like, sorry to let her down, and 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 that's just so funny to me that they this book is almost like reversing that. It's all like it's like I read that book and I was like, you know what? No. um so it was really cool. This book is sort of like a coming out journey for Velma, because in my book, like I do explore the fact that like when you look at the Scooby Gang, you're like, these are perfect kids, these are great kids, they are going out, they're exposing bad guys, they're all about justice. But like in Coolsville, like their obsession with um rooting out evil and like exposing bad doers is looked down on because it brings scandal to the town, and it upsets the status quo. So a lot of people actually in the book look at the gang like troublemakers, like always seeking to find issues where they should better leave things alone. And so they sort of stand out from the crowd, and Velma doesn't know if she really wants to stand out even further by coming out, when she's already got such a big spotlight on her. And I was really honored to have that representation of her embracing her true self in such an iconic character. I feel like so honored that young teens working through that journey themselves are going to have that experience with Velma. But Thorn in the book is out and proud and like 100% confident in her identity. And that's part of like because like I don't think you could have the Hex Girls not be proud of themselves. It's just a core part of who they are, which is another reason I think that they're such queer icons. Um, and it was really, really, really cool to write that story and to embrace that and um, to be a part of giving that representation um, to new readers.
Along the lines of representation, Scooby-Doo is not super widely known for its diversity, and Luna has been pretty notoriously whitewashed in some of her appearances. Why was it important to you to not only embrace Luna's identity, but also race shift to have the entirety of the Hex Girls be black?
That was actually it was actually really interesting because um when I was submitting my name choices for the Hex Girls at the same time, I was like, "Hey, you guys hired me off of my debut, which is which is a spooky thriller, but also the main characters of my first book, their father is a Black historian who consults with who's like a New York Times bestseller, and he consults with like this ancestry.com like app to help like uh diversify genealogy records, because it's actually really difficult if you're into genealogy to discover your connections past like a certain time, if you're Black, because uh, there was a lot of sabotage, but also just not a lot of records, because a lot of for a long time we were treated as property and not people. Like, I'm biracial, my mother is white and my father is Black, and on my mother's side I can go to back to the Mayflower. I have an ancestor on every side of every American war, and like I can even go into like nobility in Europe. But on my dad's side, the farthest back I can figure is that his last name came from the plantation that our ancestors um, were once property on. And so like Black history and like intergenerational trauma is a big focus of my debut. And um, my my debut is not super well known. I've gotten a lot more attention for Scooby than my debut. But that's good, because like everybody who reads Scooby, if they really like it, they might go read my other book. It, but my but people who have read my first book really like it, and I've gotten a lot of positive uh, uh reaction. I've listed for a couple words, I've been on some reading lists. So I was like, you guys hired me for my very well regarded Black history book. So it it might look weird for me to write an all white cast. uh and so it was like, would you be okay with some sort of like shifts of like whose identity is what. And so I suggested that Velma be Latina, which wasn't a huge shift because she's been Latina in several of the more recent like animated movies. And they were like a-okay. And then I also suggested like a Black Fred, which I thought would have been really, really great representation for um Black boys, because Fred is like the ultimate good guy. He's the ultimate green flag. And there's not a lot of really great positive uh good male Black representation. That was one of the things that upset me about Velma, is that they made Shaggy Black. They made the one stoner Black, and I was like, okay, way to embrace stereotypes. And they weren't as on board with that. And I imagine just because like shifting Velma to Latina doesn't really it doesn't change anything about how she looks. It's just adding a bit more culture, because she can be Latina and look exactly the same. And so I understand from like a branding point, if they want to do anything, if they wanted to like make an animated movie of this, they wanted him to be recognizable. But when they said no to that, I was like, okay, so the only like diversity I would be writing would be Latina. And I was like, okay, well then maybe can we just keep her white, because I don't know if I'm comfortable writing a ethnicity that isn't mine if I can't write my own ethnicity. Like I still love the gang as fully white. I've loved them as fully white my entire life. Uh, and it wasn't like a key thing. It wasn't like when they suggested it to me, I was like, only if I get to make one of them Black or something like that. It was actually something that didn't even come up until we were talking about it for some time, and I'd already signed the contract. So I was going to write them anyway, and I love them as they are. And but my editor was like super, super nice, and she understood like my apprehension in writing an identity that's not my own if I'm not also allowed to write an identity that's my own. Um, but 100% I was going to be writing Luna Black. That was a big that was a conversation I had on the first call, because her being whitewashed in earlier ones was an issue I didn't like, and I definitely wanted to bring her back to her original look. And so but Luna isn't like the Hex Girl with the majority of the focus, because Thorn narrates the book. So it would have been kind of weird again to have um um so she went to Warner Brothers and she asked if I could also make Thorn Black, and or potentially all of them Black. she's like a goth Destiny's Child. And they said, yeah, we have no problem with that. And she brought it back to me. So it was actually something that they they were on board with, and they pitched to me. It was actually wasn't even my idea. And I was like, you're gonna let me turn them into like a goth Destiny's Child? Like like a goth Beyonce? That's like so cool. And I'm like, yes, let's do that 100%. I knew that we'd get a bit of backlash because I mean, that happens all the time. That was going to happen regardless of if anybody changed. And uh it did happen when the cover came out. There were people very upset, especially on Reddit, that um the that I made all the Hex Girls black. And there were some people that were upset that I didn't make them black enough. Like, and I'm like, I only have so much control over the cover. Like, they're as black as you want them to be, and that's what fan art's for. Um, but I really liked that, and I really felt like it only enhanced the story in ways because, like, when I made like a little video after the cover came out because some people were mostly people were super excited. I got a lot of positive reaction to the cover. It's my most well performing post like ever. But there were some people who were being rude or inappropriate, and it's really important to me that my social media spaces stay like a safe space for my readers. Um, like you can say whatever you want on other platforms, but on my social media pages, you have to be respectful of other readers. And I talked about like I'm a lifelong Scooby-Doo fan. That's all we've been talking about. Like I love Scooby-Doo. I'm very well versed in Scooby-Doo. I I put a lot of, this book was built with love for the franchise. I am not here to try and manipulate it, to try and pervert it, to try and make it so that it's only relevant to me. Um, and so in that video, I was just like explaining that and saying that all changing their race didn't take anything away from the Hex Girls. And in fact, the only thing I think it's done is um, given an additional layer to some of the feelings that they already have. Like they deal a lot uh, with being misinterpreted based on how they dress, and Black Goths deal with that a lot too. They deal with that within like the goth subculture of like, and that's why have the girls all have a t-shirt that says "So goth I was born black." um I thought it was an interesting thing, especially for Thorn, because so much of Thorn's story in this book is that she is trying to fit in really, really badly because her world was upended when the events of the witch's ghost happened. And um everything that she thought she knew had sort of shifted, and things that had brought her comfort are now scary. And so she's trying to fit in, but it's not really what she wants because I mean she's goth. She's part of the Hex Girls. She's an eco goth. Like so much of who she is about embracing things that have her stand apart. Um, and so her journey is coming back into that and re-embracing it and being stronger because of it, even if people dislike or push back against that. And I felt like making her biracial like me um added to that because it also put her in like this in between of two worlds. It was just so it's something I'm really glad that I was able to do, and a lot of people have been really excited about it because also I mentioned in the video um, my interpretation of the Hex Girls as an all black girl band does not take away from their 25 years of being white. It doesn't like dismiss any um other official art or fan art. Like you can still cosplay as the original Hex Girls, but now you black girls can also cosplay as the Hex Girls, and they have a canon representation of that, and that's super exciting.
Absolutely. Um, and then talking about the events of The Witch's Ghost, the plot is obviously very heavily driven by that movie. Bringing in the lore that you wanted to expand on, why did you want to base the book rooted in those events and not like, creating your own meeting of the gang and the Hex Girls.
Well, because this was the spoiler from earlier, is that like when I originally watched the Hex Girls, I had just assumed that Ben was related to Thorn because Ben was like the lead most important character from Oakhaven, second to Thorn, and her father. And she's the only other person in Oakhaven that can do the magic that he's able to do. And she's crucial to defeating him. And and her and the movie goes out of its way to point out that she has a dad, um, but you never see her mom. But you know that her mom is where her like 1/16th Wiccan comes from. That was another thing that they wanted when they wanted me to fix some of the mistakes that they'd made with Wicca in the first movie in the book. So they wanted us to be a bit more respectful of Wicca this time around, now that it's 25 years later and we know more. um, and, and so I just assumed that like her mother was like maybe his sister or something like that, and that something had happened to her mother because her mother was not in the picture. And so that's like that's the spoiler, is that she finds out that her mother is Ben Ravencroft's sister, and that she spends the whole book trying to get away from what Ben and Sarah Ravencroft did to Oakhaven, and how it cast her in a negative light because that's not her. She's not evil. When she did magic, she wasn't trying to do evil. And then finding out that she's literally related to them, um, she's like, maybe I am evil. And it's a big turning point. It's like the climax that kicks off the third act of the book. And that was just something that I had assumed, but when I watched it, I was like, well, they never actually say that she's related to Ben. Like, it's not technically canon, but I asked if it could be, and they're like, yeah, that's I like that idea. And it was really, really, really fun to bring those elements in. Um, and also, I feel like I could have created a whole new thing, but I love their introductory story, and I think a lot of people do too. And none of the other Scooby references instances of the Hex Girls like rewrite that introduction. Like none of them say, oh, we met at like a passing festival or something. Like it's implied that every future iteration of the Hex Girls knows the Scooby Gang from what happened on the Witch's Ghost. So it just felt like if I was going to write a story about the Hex Girls, it had to at least acknowledge the Witch's Ghost. But I felt like if they were going to be so personal to be going to school together and being friends and solving a mystery together, like you couldn't really ignore it. And so I was excited to fully embrace it instead.
And obviously the Hex Girls is a band, so there's music involved. Was there ever any discussion of you like writing any lyrics or just like using some of the previous songs?
There was. Initially I had both the Hex Girls original song, like title song, and the Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air in the book. But they made me cut it because I don't think they have the masters for those. I think the lyrics like belong to the songwriters that wrote the songs. Because they were like, we need you to cut those. We're not allowed to put them in the book. And I was like, how do you expect me to write about the performances without the lyrics? But like I kind of understood why they didn't have it because, like I said, I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan, and she spent the past like 5 years talking about masters and artist rights and stuff, and like this re-recording process that she was only able to do because she holds the rights to her songs because she wrote them. So it made sense to me that they probably hired a musician for the movie to create the songs, and that person technically has the masters of the lyrics, and they would have to get copyright permission to put the lyrics in. So that's why we couldn't use the lyrics. And we did talk about me putting lyrics in, but I actually, when I was writing the book, I wrote the book in the 2 weeks that we were moving out of our house, and preparing to be like homeless. So it was a very stressful time, and I'm really proud of the book, but like I just did not have the time to also come up with an entirely new original song, which bummed me out because my next original book also features a singer, and I wrote like almost an album of songs for that. There's lyrics all over the place in that book, and it would have been really fun to include a lyric or two here. We were able to get away with one like lyric from the original songs in the book, but it was really funny because when they were like, no, you can't put the lyrics in, and I'm like, their songs are the most iconic part of them. Like, yeah, yeah, my editor was like, this is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in that case, if there is another book down the line, that's your
Yeah,
opportunity to write some
if
more
if
Hex Girls lyrics.
yeah, so buy lots of copies of the book, and if they hire me to write another book, I will write you guys a Hex Girls song.
And I don't want to give anything away too much plot wise, but I do really love the way that you tied Earth, Wind, Fire, and Air into the plot of the story itself.
Yes, that was gonna be like that was gonna be a really important part of like the epilogue chapter, is that I included it, and I actually asked if we could change the title of the song because um like I said, air and wind are the same thing, but if you change one of them, then it's just the different elements of earth, and that's really important, especially to Wicca. And it's like you said, it was a really important, crucial part of the movie that ties the book. Like I'm a cinematic writer, so it's like a movie in my head, um where all that comes together. Yeah, I was really excited and happy when I figured out how I could embrace that together. So I guess you could kind of call that the Hex Girls song I wrote, and that I like put a new spin on that particular song. And it's not only relevant to the original movie, but it's also very, very relevant to this book.
And was that something that had been in it since the outline, or did you have to write a little bit to get that connection really embedded in there?
I think I think it was in the outline. Like I said, my outlines are really, really, really detailed. They're like scene by scene. I like to call them like a draft zero. They're basically like the skeleton of the book. Um, it's everything that happens in the book, and even some dialogue. And it's about 10,000 words, and then I usually expand that into like a 50 to 60,000 first draft, and then we expand it some more. I'm an underwriter, so editing for me is often strengthening and just adding on, because I like to figure out my problems before I start writing, because I don't like writing myself into a corner. So the way that they defeat who they defeat is was always in there the way that it was in there. But actually, initially, there was no um, supernatural big bad. It was just going to be exposed corruption, because I was like, well, the first movie had a supernatural explosion. This one, it would be interesting if it seems like it's supernatural the whole book, and then it turns out to be a bad guy in a mask. And they liked that original idea, but then they were all like, what if there could be like and they're all like, and what if people died? Which was so funny because when I was coming up with the story, like I was I was trying to think of like the severity of the stakes, because like I like writing super big stakes. But I googled, does anyone die in Scooby-Doo? Like, and there are like there's like implied off-screen deaths, and like there's like implied deaths in Zombie Island, but like nobody officially dies on screen. And I was like, okay, so that's like a rule. I can't kill anybody. But then they were like, you can kill people. I'm like, are you gonna make me the first person to murder somebody in Scooby-Doo? That is like such an honor. Oh my gosh. I was so excited about it.
And there's not just one.
No. And what's so funny is that my family, everybody everybody in my family is in the book, and they are either a bad guy or murdered.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to touch on was the like darker and supernatural elements because for a while the franchise strayed away from that a little bit. So it's interesting to hear that like that some of those elements are ones that like people on the Warner Brothers side were really interested in.
It was really, really important to them. Like I said, Project Darker Gay, like their notes were either like up the relationship aspects of Thorn and Velma, like give her this coming out journey, or murder people, add real ghosts, like up the stakes. And they really didn't want it to be mistaken for another one of those chapter books. They wanted it to, and I think that was like them wanting to lean into, I think they want it to do well in the YA market. And right now the YA market does have a lot of high stakes. It tends to lean upper YA, like older and darker.
Totally. And so if there was another book, where might we see the story go?
My idea was that like if there were more books, I could tell like a book from the point of view of each Hex Girl. And I even have a title and like a general idea of like what emotional journeys each one would go in. Um I left some seeds open at the end of the book because there is like a secret to the to how chill Coolsville is, that underlines like the whole book. And what they do at the end of the book really like opens that possibility up for a lot of chaos and interesting magical things to potentially happen. Um, so I would love to write one or two more books from um, Dusker Luna's point of view, and have maybe focused on a different a Scooby gang member, because this book, like obviously everybody gets their moment, but this is Thorn and Velma's book. Maybe I showed how they bonded with other characters. Like Luna was really got along with the engineering and the planning of the traps with Fred, and Dusk loves Shaggy and Scooby. So those would be really fun things to explore in future books. But that will only happen if people really, really like the books and buy a lot of them.
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
We interrupt this episode with an important bulletin. You've reached the end of our spoiler full section. You may now return to a spoiler-free interview on the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo.
Speaking of, by the time this episode is out, the book will have been released, so where can people find and purchase it?
You can find it at any retailer in the US and Canada. Like I've been getting lots of people messaging me from the UK and being like, "Where can I find it here?" And I'm like, "You're gonna have to get an American friend to ship it to you at this point, because then that's out of my control." But it is a traditionally published book. It's an officially licensed book. That's also been a very funny thing. There have been some people who've been like, um, aren't the Hex Girls copyrighted? Like, and I'm like, you guys think I got to this point without explicit permission? Like the audacity I would have to do that. No, it is like officially licensed. You should be able to get it at like your favorite independent bookstore, a Barnes and Noble, the big a labeled website online. um and I really hope that it's like in grocery stores, like because I come from poverty. A lot of the ways for me to get a new release when I was young is if it was affordable at Walmart. And I have a feeling that it could be stocked at Walmart, and if I see it at Walmart, I'm going to like sob. So that would be really, really cool. But just pick it up as soon as possible. It's really beautiful too. It's beautiful illustration, and it's nice, and it's hardcover. It's a nice collector piece if you're a Scooby fan.
How important are like pre-orders and first week sales?
Pre-orders are like extremely important. Like I've been saying, I was paid like a flat rate, because sometimes with IP you can get like royalties. But you don't own the copyright because you didn't come up with the initial franchise. Um, but I don't get royalties for this book, which means that for each copy sold, I don't get anything else. So even if it like sells in perpetuity for the rest of time. I don't get any more money from it. If they make a movie from it, I won't get any more money from it. The only way I personally benefit from it is if it sells enough copies that they want to hire me again to write some more, or if it sells enough early copies that I hit a list. There are like 3 potential lists I could hit. I could hit the New York Times list, I could hit the USA Today list, or like the independent bookstores list. I have no idea if I will hit any of them, but pre-orders and first week sales, which are from the Tuesday that it comes out until the Monday following, are extremely important for that. Like, those are the only sales that are going to count towards listing, because books don't really sell as much as they sell in their first week, unless they like grow to be like a mega hit. And I think that the book will sell consistently, but I don't think like 6 months from now, like everybody in the world is just going to be like, well, you know what? We should really buy the Hex Girls book out of nowhere, especially if I've moved on to working and promoting on other things, because I've been promoting all summer long. So if you are planning on buying the book, even if you don't plan on reading it right now, the best time would have been to pre-order before today, which is when the book will officially be out and you'll be listening to this, or in the first week, like leading up to the start of September. But like, I'm not going to hate you if you don't have the money and it's going to take you some time, or if you need to get it from your library and you're on a hold list. Like, the second best thing you can do if you can't afford to get it early is to just get it in general and to tell people about it, review it, and pick up my original fiction, like my first book, which is called The Shadow Sister, because I do get royalties on that one. And I would love if people who liked Scooby picked up The Shadow Sister or my next book. And you could also just but you could also spend no money and just follow me on social media and interact and talk Scooby with me. That would be super great.
Awesome. Um, can you tell me more about that fandom, what is it called? Fandom the workshop?
Yes. Okay. So part of my pre-order campaign, like I said, I'm currently like living in a trailer, so I don't have a lot of money. So my pre-order campaign isn't like super wide this time, but if you pre-order or buy it directly, now that since you won't be able to pre-order anymore by the time this comes out, but if you buy it from Grit City Books, like GRIT City, like the city, books.com, you'll get a signed copy. You can even put in your personalizations. You can have me draw a doodle, like, or draw your favorite Scooby villain. But please know that I'm not an artist. I'm a writer. I'm not that good at drawing. So if you ask for a doodle, don't expect like a Picasso. Or maybe do expect Picasso, because it will look a little janky. But you can have a personalization, and I can put your name and I'll sign it for you, and you'll get an exclusive art print that only copies from Grit City will have, because Grit City I can just take the art print there and they'll put it in the book before they send it out. And that saves me money over shipping each art print individually. And you don't have to do anything but order if you want the art print and a signed copy. But I know that not everybody can afford to pre-order from my independent bookstore, because you also have to pay for shipping, but they will ship all over the country. Like, they'd prefer to pre-order from their local independent bookstore where they can go pick it up, or get it at Barnes and Noble, or get it at that website online. uh, and so I've had it if you go to Lily, LILY.LA/pre-order, and this will stay up for at least the first week that the book is out. Um, and submit your receipt so that I know that you've ordered it. I will add everybody to a list, and I will be hosting a virtual presentation of my well-received writing workshop, From Fandom to Fans of Your Own, how writing fan fiction could make you a better writer. And it talks about the history of fan fiction, how a lot of stories that you know and love are actually fan fiction, and how writing fan fiction can help boost your writing skills and your collaboration skills, and eventually, potentially, uh, get you hired to write in your favorite worlds. I've performed it a couple times at libraries, and it's been really, really well received. People really like it. And I'll be hosting a virtual version that anybody can attend from their bed. And I will be coordinating that with people who submit their receipt to that form. Anywhere, anywhere, whether you order from Grit City, whether you order from any bookstore, as long as you submit me a screenshot of your receipt or a picture of your receipt if you ordered in person, uh, everybody will be set up for that. And then once that closes after first week, I'll schedule a time that works for everybody and it'll be recorded. I'll have it like as an access on like my Patreon afterwards. Um, and I think that that'll be really fun. But that's what I can do currently to thank readers, and that's all out of my own pocket. Like it's unaffiliated with Warner. It was just something I wanted to do to thank readers for their support.
That's really exciting and an awesome way to loop people in for sure. Is that art print only US shipping, I assume, maybe not Canada?
It is only US, but I I can do Canada, I think. Um, I think Grit City ships to Canada. I don't know. But I will. I did an art print for my first book, and then after the pre-order campaign was over, I added it as a reward tier on my Patreon, and Patreon will print it and ship it to you once you've reached that level. And I'm going to add the new art print to my Patreon afterwards, in addition with the screen, because that's going to be something I'm focusing on after Scooby's out, is boosting my Patreon, talking about working on my next book, which I hope is my next book deal. Fingers crossed. Uh, but yeah, at this moment, I might also like if people wanted enough, I could I have I have the commercial rights to it, so I could list it and you could buy a copy from me and I could ship it to you. It's just that it would cost me at least $1 per to mail it just in the US, and then to mail it internationally would cost me even more. So I would if I have if you don't pre-order the book, I would have to sell it just because it's difficult. But also if I come to your town, if I come to your town and you buy a copy of a book at an event with me, I will be always carrying copies of the art print to include um if you buy it from me in person.
And so we're kind of winding down into the wrap up here. A question that I like to ask everyone is why do you think that a cartoon about a mystery solving dog is so important and still so relevant after 50 years?
I think we've talked about that several times. It's they've got like a timeless sort of essence to them. Um, and also I feel like for a lot of people, Scooby was their dog. I think it's even in the author bio that I have on the book is that Scooby was my dog until my mom could trust me with a real one. Um, he's just such a perfect dog, and it's it's just a group like people feel really alone sometimes, and those Saturday morning cartoons, you have your four buddies and you have your dog, and it just feels really it's like the epitome of found family. So I think that that's really relevant, and I think they're more relevant now than ever, that they're a group of young people who are really motivated to exposing and defeating corruption, and like I can't there's really nothing I could say that could make that less timely. Like
Just before we end, we kind of talked about all of your books. So I don't know if there's maybe any new projects that you'd like to promote, but where can people find you on social media and websites and things like that?
yes, I am at Lily Meade, LILYMEADE, at most social media. I have like a platform everywhere, even if I'm not the most active. Right now, I'm the most active on Instagram and Threads. Um, but I have accounts on, I used to be really active on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, you're mostly going to get Taylor Swift posts. That's the main reason I still have my Twitter, is that that's where most of the Swiftie fandom is. But if you want book updates, your best bet is to go to my Instagram. I'm working really hard on building it up because it's people have been really responding there. I've gained I was at like 1,500 followers for like 6 years, and just in the past like 4 months, I've doubled that. So my goal is to hit 5,000 followers on Instagram by the end of the year. Um, and but I'm active everywhere. I have a lot of YouTube videos on writing advice at Lily Meade Books on YouTube, and my TikTok is also Lily Meade Books. But I'm everywhere. If you go to lilymeade.com, you'll be able to find me, and I'm going to be really talking a lot about my next book. I am close to being done with edits on that with my original fiction publisher, but I don't have an exact date. So you'd have to follow me to figure out when that one's going to come out. And then I'm currently working on my next book that I'd like to sell. And I will be talking about the process of plotting that and then writing that a lot on my Patreon over the fall. And then hopefully, well, I won't be able to talk about it until something's announced, but hopefully once Scooby comes out, other IPs will be like, wow, she's really good at writing intellectual property. We should hire her for something. Because I really like writing intellectual property. I like how fast it is, and I like getting to play with other people's worlds. So I'd love to do more in that world. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you. I'm glad you liked the book, and I've had so much fun talking with you.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Lily Meade for taking the time to chat with me. For more Scooby content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram or on TikTok at Unmasked SD. You can also always find the podcast at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. I also highly, highly, highly recommend getting a copy of the Hex Girls, A Rogue Thorn. If you liked this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!